Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Aaron Rubin. He is the founder and CEO of ShipHero. Very excited to get him on the show today. Definitely have been following him on LinkedIn for a long time. So definitely really interested to hear about the ShipHero journey and how that kind of all came about. And also to talk to him too about kind of like how he's so in touch with really what's going on the operations floor and what people will really be looking for in an operations environment. I can tell from his LinkedIn post that he's very much in tune with that. So I'm very interested to kind of pick his brain and talk to him about that. So Aaron, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I am pretty good. It's allergy season, so my voice is a little, but other than that, I'm good.
All right, no problem. I won't try and push you too hard on the voice, so we'll see how this goes. No, that's actually the first segment, but no. So it's great to get you on here. I'm definitely very interested to hear more about kind of the whole ShipHero journey. But why don't you tell us kind of a little bit about your background? And it's pretty interesting how this kind of came to be. So I'm curious to hear about how you kind of started out with, I think, which originally was a jiu-jitsu business, now to have a 3PL and also WMS. Tell us a little bit about that journey and kind of how you landed in this arena.
Yeah, so still own the jiu-jitsu brand, 93 brand, if anyone is looking for some jiu-jitsu geese. We started that company way back in college in 1999, probably around 2012, decided to take the technology that we wanted to exist for warehouses and build it. Started building like 2013, built warehouse management software for brands and 3PLs. So these days, the leading WMS for e-commerce brands. So we serve sort of some newer brands like Solo brands, James Purse, Glossier, as well as some more like legacy type brands like Canadian Tire, Giant Tiger, as well as 3PLs. So then we serve over 50 at this point, 3PLs that use our software primarily to serve e-commerce and omni-channel brands. So everyone who was big in e-commerce now sells to Walmart and Target and obviously FBA and all that. So it's beyond just e-commerce these days. But we built that warehouse management software, and we continue to grow that. Our goal is to provide best software in the world for e-commerce brands and 3PLs that serve them. I think we're doing a decent job of it.
Interesting. Yeah. And I hear a lot of good things definitely about ShipHero, and I see some things too as well. And, I'm curious though, I mean, when you had the jiu-jitsu business, right, and you were doing your own fulfillment for that, I mean, when you set out to build this WMS essentially, I mean, was it something where you're like, I'm tired of what's on the market, so let me build my own thing? I mean, did you envision that you were going to kind of scale it to this side and have it for many other customers to be able to utilize?
Yeah, we built it purposely to sell as its own company. So we had our own in-house tech we developed, but we started from scratch. Yosef Haas, who's our VP product at ShipHero, was working with me at my prior company. And it was a brand new company, new tech. We took a lot of the learnings for our in-house, but it was entirely new, intended to make it this big. The world was still on-prem, shockingly still a lot on-prem. And just didn't want any solutions in the market or couldn't afford the good ones, right? The good ones were like way too much money, and there was nothing else that was viable for us. So we decided to build it, make it a product, work a lot with Shopify. So that was sort of the direction we wanted to go, sort of the newer brands that we're going to use Shopify, now Shopify Plus. So we serve more than 10% of all Shopify Plus stores globally use our software. So sort of latched on to the success of Shopify and tried to build connecting to their software, but more thinking about the same customer base, the brand that wants to grow quick, doesn't want to own, doesn't want to be on Salesforce Commerce Cloud, like just wants something that's going to work really well and at a reasonable price and scale really well. And that's what we try to do on the WMS side, what Shopify does on the brand side. So that's been a pretty good partnership, and we've been able to grow a lot in that ecosystem.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting how you kind of went out and created what you want essentially, and be able to fill kind of that gap in the market, like you said, where there's like, these huge players that are kind of, out of reach for a lot of shippers out there. And, the kind of lower tier, I guess we could say, like, is not so great or so robust to the level that you want it to be. So you kind of filled that gap a little bit. And, I mean, did you start to do, because you were doing fulfillment for the jiu-jitsu business, right? I mean, did you start to bring on additional 3PL clients prior to releasing ShipHero WMS, or you created WMS first and were selling that and then brought on 3PL clients? I mean, how did that kind of work?
Yeah, so we do have our own buildings. We serve a handful of brands out of we have 1 million square feet of our own space. But most of what our business is, and that's 1 million square feet seems like a lot, but that's single-digit percentages of what we serve. Yeah. Almost everything is through the WMS. We're lucky enough to serve a few really interesting brands like Momofuku, which is a great food brand, Yodo, which makes these players for kids, Blue Buffalo, which is a General Mills brand, and a few others. But that was way later. So that was about 3 years ago where we opened our first building. Okay. Prior to that, it was just WMS. And our goal was actually never to open our own. What we found was there wasn't some of the things that we wanted 3PLs to do. No one was doing. We actually worked with Shopify and their Shopify Fulfillment Network. We launched that with them. And then they bought Deliver for $2 billion and stopped using us. Yeah. But we tried to convince them of how we thought the 3PL business should run, and had a ton of really good conversations. But at the end of it, it was always like, yes, but. And then we're finally like, all right, I'm just going to put my money where my mouth is and just open it myself and just sort of demonstrate how we think 3PL should run, which is about balancing inventory for our customers. So the big innovation we have is a brand can send us all our product to, let's say, our Las Vegas warehouse. We move that product to Dallas, to Jacksonville, Florida, downtown Pennsylvania for them. So they're not responsible for staging it everywhere. And then we deliver it using regional carriers. So it's a much more effective model for the right brands. It's not for everyone, but for a low SKU, high velocity brand, the product's over 1 pound, it works really well. So we wanted that to exist. We created it. We do that as a 3PL, but almost all our businesses as a warehouse management software.
Interesting. And so I'm curious, I mean, how much does your 3PL business serve as like kind of a testing ground almost for the WMS?
Yeah, so we learned a ton like that. I can't even remember how we did product development before we had our own warehouse. It's so much harder. I would never want to go back to that world. Because we have, it's not we have customers that are bigger than us, but still at 1 million square feet, it's a reasonable enough size that you really get to face all the challenges that a shipper has, right? We have lots of buildings, lots of people. We're in 2 countries. So we see a lot of the challenges. And as a software provider, it's easy to say, yeah, we built a solution and, why is it not working with the customer? Well, customer has bad training, like change management, they adopt it. You should blame the customer. When you have your own building and your people are not using the software, you're like, oh, wow, man, that's shit. Like that feature sucks and I got to fix it, right? And we do it. And like we spend so much time, like our product people are in our warehouses all the time. And when you're in a client warehouse, it's helpful, but it's not nearly as helppful as talking to people that are your own employees, because clients always have, like, there's always a filter. Everyone lies, right? No. And then when it's your own building, your own payroll, we have hundreds of people in our warehouse on our payroll. So if there's a feature that's going to save a couple of seconds, like we want to build that feature because that saves us, $100,000 a year in labor, right? So it aligns us pretty well with what our customers need and also helps us understand the challenge. I'll give you a concrete example, which is my new theory is that 3PLs only make money on half their customers, but they don't know which half, which is something that we realized as we were running our own buildings, which is there's shared labor, there's shared resources, there's a lot of shared things. And to actually break out your real costs, customer A versus customer B,
right?
As we got into that, we realized, wow, customer A makes a lot more money than we thought. And customer B, like, I don't think we make anything on them. Just because maybe when we signed them, they were a little easier. And then over time, complexity got added, or there's receiving challenges or these other challenges that take time. And it's super hard to know that unless you're sitting there with a stopwatch like every 3 months and doing time studies on every part of the process, which no one does. You do a time study in the beginning and a year later, the customer changed half their SKUs and time studies no longer value. You don't realize you're losing money on them, or maybe you're making something, but not enough to be worth the effort, right? So we're working and have been working for the last 6 months. We're working for the next year on providing analytics to our 3PL so they can see exactly how many seconds, how much labor, how much the box costs, how much shipping, all their costs associated with different clients, so that they could then go back to the client that's making them no money because the profile changed and say, hey guys, listen, you changed all these things. Like, we need to reprice this deal so they can make money again. If we weren't actually running our own buildings, I don't know that we would have gotten deep enough into the problem to really understand that, wow, some customers, you're putting a lot of effort, you're shipping 80,000 orders for, it seems like a great customer, but then when you do the math, you actually didn't make anything on them.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty crazy. And I think, the analytics side, it's like so important to be able to see that and get that data to make those types of decisions. Cause I mean, like you said, like if you look on the surface level, 80,000 orders, like, oh, wow, this customer doing a lot of volume, I must be, doing great with this customer. Right. And then when you look at it like from a granular level and break it down on the labor and, what's required to get it done and get those orders out the door, you're not making anything or making very little than what you would expect from some volume like that. So it's great that you're able to see that type of thing. And I think definitely great, obviously, for your customers that you're able to kind of take your own operation and overlay your WMS on that and be able to make improvements and see that. So I'm curious, and I can tell as an operations guy who's been warehouse manager and things like that you yourself go to the floor, right, to see like what's going on and how to make these improvements within the WMS that would really be something that's like beneficial to an operations manager, someone who's running a 3PL or people on the floor. So I'm curious, like, tell us a little bit about how you kind of go to the floor to look for improvements and how do you kind of go about that process of really doing your continuous improvement through ShipHero and then ultimately deciding like, okay, this is something to focus on and something to improve in the WMS for the customers.
Yeah, so I don't drive most of the changes. So most of the changes are driven by other people. I think one of the risks that comes with the CEO hat is people take you too seriously. So if I'm on the floor and I'm like, oh, I don't know if you're doing that right, suddenly like everyone's like, oh no, Aaron said we got to change the process, right? Oh, yeah. So, which is not necessarily what I want, right? So I got to be careful to say less, but I do try to watch. I do spend a lot of time just doing the process. Like watching has some value, but nothing like spend 8 hours shipping orders. The little like, sand in the gears, little pieces of friction, like you really feel them. I try to do more of that before I have some real feedback versus like, oh, this guy looks like he's going too slow and try to do something. Because then you make all these waves when there's a warehouse manager. We have a whole ops team. Everyone's working on optimizing it. And you don't want them to deviate from their change plan just because the CEO was there for 2 days, said something, and now it's like, oh, this is the biggest priority, right? So yeah. It's a tough balance, but I like to either spend a lot of time doing something, replenishment, receiving, whatever, doesn't matter, and then have feedback, or just sit there, watch, shake hands, let people talk to me, but don't say too much. I was think like either approach.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and definitely, I think in the big boss, right, quote unquote, comes onto the floor, everybody gets a little kind of nervous, right, and doesn't necessarily perform like they typically would. Yep. So I think it's very interesting that you actually go in and you do the work. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have a passion for that operations work. So I'm curious, like where does that passion kind of come from, and being able to, like you said, go on the floor for 8 hours and do replenishment to see how something's working, or go ship orders in one of the warehouses while you're sitting in the C-suite, essentially a CEO. But where does that passion kind of come from to be on the floor and really kind of get your hands dirty to see what's really going on?
Yeah, man, it's super fun. It's a great I'm on the computer all day. I started as a programmer. That's my background. So I love writing code. I don't write code anymore. We've got people that are much better at it than me. Spending time on the warehouse floor is fun. Solving problems is good. It's fun we use segways to move around the buildings, jump on a segway, find a problem, fix it, come back, be like, all right, that's all. Next thing, right? There's a sense of accomplishment that's different than the sense of accomplishment you get in a sort of our normal job, being on Zoom all day, talking to people, right? That hands-on is really nice. It's super satisfying to even just bulk ship. And there's these are 500 orders. I got them all out the door today. During peak, I took my daughter to the warehouse several days, up before dawn, back at, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And I just sat there just all day, just taking care of customers' orders. And you're exhausted, but you feel a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. You did something concrete. You got a lot done, and it's good camaraderie in the warehouse too. Most warehouses, people listening to your podcast will know. People from the outside might not know. Are actually usually super friendly. Everyone's there, happy, having a good time. It's not a party, but it's a positive attitude. It's a positive place to work. There's good camaraderie. So it's always a good vibe. So it always feels accomplished.
Yeah, definitely. And I love to work on the floor too. And I bring my son actually to pick orders with me too, at our fulfillment center. So, I think it's a great thing. And like you said, it becomes like a family environment almost. You're all kind of working together to accomplish this goal. It's we need to get this many orders out today, and everybody's, kind of pitching in to do that. It's a great thing to feel and be around that. So it's awesome that you're so kind of passionate about that, and you still find the fun in it too as well, which I think helps you to really kind of make those proper improvements and understand all those types of things. So I'm curious, from, your days of starting to ship, I guess, the jiu-jitsu stuff back in 1999 to now, there's been so many advances in technology, right, in our world. And, we see automation, more robotics, AI coming into play, all these different things. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts around that? How does ShipHero view that? I think I saw that at some point recently, you guys got NVIDIA robotics in one of your operations. Tell us a little bit about that and how you kind of view that in the logistics and warehouse world.
Yeah, we've been working with NVIDIA team for probably a year and a half at this point. I use them in one of our buildings. I think the industry is still pretty old. A lot of the improvements I'll see is, let's say you install a Locust or Six Rivers in a building that has just poor WMS, poor process. You'll see a big improvement. Companies that have good process, good analytics, good tools, good optimizations, the savings from those cobots are not as much. So some of the more complex things in VIA is a sort of a hybrid goods to person. You start to see a little bit more of an improvement. But the technology today, let me put it a different way. Sometimes you give up flexibility and you get speed. Some of those are really good if you have a defined problem that you're going to be solving for the next 10 years. If you know exactly what you're shipping for the next 10 years, and you want to put in static solutions to those, that could be really helpful. There's other ones like a cobot that's helpful, even if it changes, right? It doesn't really matter if using Locus, what your customer mix, if you went from shipping apparel to electronics, as long as it's e-commerce, it'll still work. But the advantages are lower. So I think we're still at a point where some of the hype is above the actual results, having been in a lot of buildings that have adopted solutions. And then when you sort of look at the metrics and was there an ROI, a lot of times it doesn't quite live up to where it should be or should have been or what was sold in. So I think we're still in the early sort of first wave of robotics. It used to be material handling, now it's robotics. I think there's still a second and a third wave to come that'll be better. So I think there's still a little bit more hype than substance, though there are definitely some good providers. We work with Locus, we work with India, we work with Six Rivers, we work with AutoStore. Like, they're delivering value, but you got to match the implementation to the actual customer need. And I think there's more to do. We're not at the end state of what warehouse robotics is going to look like. It's not going to look like fixed conveyors, right? It's going to be a more flexible solution. And I always tell people, you'll know, but people outside the industry, they expect like, oh, all these buildings are all full of robots running around everywhere. Like, most buildings, you go into a 1 million square foot building, it's just people. It's just people, forklifts, some conveyors, the same as it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think I mean, in my opinion, I definitely think that the flexibility and the most flexible solutions are going to be the ones that win. Because like you're saying, I mean, if you want to solve for something and you know that you're going to be shipping the same way for 10 years or the same type of thing, which is kind of unrealistic in most scenarios, I think, to know that far in advance, just because of market changes and especially around e-commerce too, just consumer changes in demand and things like that. I mean, I think that flexibility is definitely going to be key. But I'm curious specifically because obviously, you're very involved in the 3PL community and there's a lot of smaller kind of independent 3PLs as well out there that I'm sure you guys are involved with and also have as customers. I mean, for them, trying to think about, does automation, robotics make sense for them right now? I mean, how would you advise them or what advice would you give them when they're starting to think about that, or should they even be thinking about that at this point?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, I think for most, they probably should not be. And I'm still talking people, 500,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Usually there's a lot of room to do in process improvement of flows within the buildings. What will happen is they'll focus a lot on one aspect and then implement robotics for it. But if that aspect is only 30% of their total labor, and then let's just give you a more concrete example, right? If you're picking a wide range of products, some e-com, some B2B, some FBA prep, and then you're going to say, okay, we're going to implement a solution to improve our picking, and then maybe you're taking a 15% reduction in labor on your picking process, but your picking process for e-com is only 20% or 30% of your total labor costs in the building. So now what you basically ended up implementing is a 4 or 5% labor cost improvement in your building. And that was 12 months of your roadmap. Like, there are other ways, by just focusing on all the different steps and really just doing the hard work of understanding your process and just iterating on the process, where you can save more than that, and you're not spending all the money on the robotics and going through all the technical costs and all the costs of the robotics. So I think sometimes people look at robotics as a silver bullet, but warehouses are complex. There's never going to be one solution that solves your warehousing problems. you're picking, you're packing, you're receiving, you're replenishing, you're doing pallets, you're doing cases, you're doing eaches. These are all separate problems, and there's not going to be one robotic solution that's going to solve it all. So, and if you've got give you an example. If you're shipping a lot of volume, you got to ship with lots of carriers. You want to implement the sorting solution because you know you're doing 1 million packages a month, and the sort is X number of people, and you have enough room. You're going to put it in, and it's going to reduce your sort times. You're still going to have 1 or 2 people facilitating, but it's going to save you X number of hours. Like that might be a good ROI, right? So you can do the math on that, but just that's solving one part of your problem, right? Which is your outbound sortation. Like you got to look at them all as individual problems and figure out where it's worth investing in. Robotics as a solution, like it's not one thing.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really good point. And I think too, it's key what you mentioned in there about, there's a lot of optimization and processes and things that can probably still happen prior to even looking at like a robotics solution, right? I think there's like a lot of steps and continuous improvement that you could do before you try to bring in, like you said, the quote unquote silver bullet, right? That can solve all this thing. If I just plop this robot in here, it's going to take care of all my problems, right? Probably not. So I think there's a lot to go there as well. And I agree with you. Really interesting thoughts there. And definitely, it's interesting to see kind of how this continues to evolve, and I'd be interested to see like also how people start to look at this in a couple of years, I think, from a 3PL perspective, and, what makes sense, and really kind of what becomes really the areas where people focus on looking at robotics and then having that flexibility that you mentioned earlier as well. So now you're also very much in tune with the e-commerce market, obviously, right? Because you have a lot of customers who are doing e-commerce fulfillment through ShipHero, and I'm sure you see a lot of data around that, and you share some on LinkedIn too, which is a great thing. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts kind of on the e-commerce market right now, and then kind of heading into next year? I mean, are you seeing that, is it still going to be growing? Is it kind of trailing off, flatlining? I mean, what do you see from your perspective, and what stands out to you?
Yeah, definitely the first half of the year was the weakest we've had year over year probably ever in e-commerce, or certainly since 2008, 2009. This just makes sense, right? People can travel. We're way past the COVID bump. We had a customer, celebrity, last week sold over 250,000 orders in a week, over 1 million units in a week. There's definitely people still moving product in e-com, and we see some companies that are putting up really, really strong growth numbers. So it's not even, right? Some companies are doing really well, but on average, we're not going to hit that 15 to 18% growth that we got in prior years. I don't think we're going to see that this year. Does it get back to it after that? Probably, right? Because that's the long run trend. And probably not 15, maybe it goes to 12. E-commerce is going to continue to grow domestically in the U.S. Obviously, outside the U.S., in Latin America, it's growing even faster, right? So it's coming off a much smaller base, but in percentages, growing really quickly. We've got 3PLs using us all over the world, but just to call out, we've got Chile, Mexico, Colombia. Those guys are doing amazing, growing really rapidly. So, but for the U.S. and Canadian markets, I think it's slower growth. I'm really happy with quality improvements. I think you're seeing brands and 3PLs do a much better job of their fulfillment. You order one and you get for the exact same thing. Happens a lot less. People are adopting better tech. The managerial class in warehouses is getting much better. I think it's a problem. I spoke about it a few times. Definitely a talent shortage in logistics. We need more talented people to join the market, but we're getting a bit of that. So I think the quality of talent in the buildings are getting better. The quality of the software in the buildings is getting better. The consistency of delivery experience is better. Part of that is probably the poor operators going out of business also. But the industry itself is really maturing. It's doing well. I think it's going to be more of a steady growth. Then the VC money isn't pouring in like it used to. Some people have exited. So I think we're in a good, healthy environment to be a 3PL operator. I think for brands, there are challenges. It's not as easy as it was several years ago, but it's still there'll still be growth in e-com, and the good brands seem to still be doing pretty well. It's just a little bit harder.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be interesting. And like you said, I mean, it's kind of, we had the COVID kind of anomaly in life, right? Just in general. And, it's certainly interesting to see kind of as things are, like you said, coming back to normal, how the kind of that's navigating that and coming through. But I mean, I think that the growth will definitely be there, and it'd be interesting to see kind of how that continues to evolve. And I think also it'd be interesting to see too, like, some of the different channels that things get sold through. I mean, how do you feel about that? Like, the whole idea of like TikTok getting into fulfillment and things like that, and all these kind of new shopping channels for e-commerce.
Yeah, so I think we're working on some sort of technical partnership with them. We're more e-com, the better for us, right? We're in the business of back. So wherever you're going to sell it, we're happy. I think the big thing you'll be hearing more of, I hope, is returns and those items getting resold, or how those are handled and processed. That we've got some work on our roadmap to improve just the back end of how returns are graded, so some more stuff get resold. Like, we have a bit of a crisis threat word, but in returns just drive so much cost for e-commerce companies, and a lot of that stuff just gets trashed. So I think that's a channel sort of that we'll see more of, the returns channel. I think everyone other than Amazon and Shopify have struggled, like, Facebook shops and Instagram. And like, I don't know if the sales on the platform, I'm optimistic for what TikTok will do, but I don't know that sales on the platform, no one's cracked that yet in the US. Obviously, outside the US, a whole different story. But in the US, sales on the platform are not quite there. I don't know. I'm interested to see what will happen. Shopify is also so good, and Amazon are so good at what they do, and they have such a good experience that it's a high bar to beat, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen?
And I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, I can see where, that, especially with TikTok, because you have like that kind of like faster accelerated virality to things and products there. But I think like it's, the back end has to be really good, right? Because you catch like the consumer's attention with a product. But if you catch my attention, like, and, I guess I'm speaking for myself, like if something catches my attention, like on social media, and I think to myself, like in that moment, like, oh, that's cool, like to have, right? If I then go to like, buy it right away, like, quote unquote influenced, I guess, in that moment, if I don't like get it like the next day or 2 days at least, like then I'm probably, by the time it gets to me, like I'm kind of going to be over it, I can imagine, because it's going to be like a very impulse buy, I think. So, I mean, I think the back end of the fulfillment side, like really needs to be there, that it's going to get to the consumer quickly to kind of still be attached to like that initial feeling that the consumer has.
Yeah, so one thing I'm super optimistic about. You haven't heard much about it yet, but I'm really hoping you do. Is Shop Promise, which is Shopify's sort of telling you when things are going to arrive, a commitment there. So I think not everything's out, but we've been doing a lot of work with the Shopify team. They've been doing a lot of work internally. So you expect to see some news there that I hope will help drive some of that customers to feel good about buying it at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important too, having that kind of visibility as to where the package is and product is kind of in that shipping life cycle, and having more transparency, visibility to that. So definitely interested to see what happens there, and obviously how the market continues to evolve. So, it's been great to have you on the show here, Aaron. And I'm curious, I guess, before we wrap up, kind of a last takeaway from you for 3PLs that are out there listening. What is your one piece of advice for 3PLs out there right now?
So I think the 3PL market is actually in a really good spot today. Customers maybe got a little bit trained on VC subsidized rates for a little bit there. So now that those are no longer existing, the pricing is normalized. So it's really helping. Knowing who your customer is and serving them well those are the 3PLs that we see doing really well. They're always pretty engaged CEOs. I mean, that's something I see pretty consistently where the CEOs know their customers, they're familiar with the problems. Those are the ones that do really well. The ones who sort of I can't worry about any individual customer because I got like 4,000 of them. Those companies don't. I mean, they have 4,000 customers, but the consistency on those are usually so low because they're not getting the level of service they need. So we're in a business where you as the 3PL are like oxygen to your customers. Like they cannot live without you. So if you can live without them, if they're like, it's just another customer, like it just doesn't work. They need to be really important to you. So if you're a big 3PL and you have little customers, I don't really think that works. So I think the best ones, if you're a 3PL, just focus on not necessarily the count of customers, but the quality, engage with them. Don't try to think about how am I going to scale this 100x. Just like sign a big customer, serve them well, keep them happy, sign another big customer, just keep going that way. It's like a really old school sort of business model, but it works really well. There's a lot of really profitable 3PLs out there that are doing a great job for their customers, have high retention, but they got them all one at a time and service them all one at a time.
Very good advice. And I think that's definitely great to always kind of, be able to same level of service across the board. Super important to be able to have longevity in business, I think, in general. So great advice there from you, Aaron. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me here about all these great things. If people are interested in learning more about ShipHero, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so if you're a shipper, brand, or a 3PL, and you're not using our software,
what's wrong with
definitely recommend you take a look. Yeah, what's wrong with it? We'll help you. We'll fix that for you. So just ShipHero.com or get me at Aaron@ShipHero.com or get me on LinkedIn. Glad to show you what we can do. I think we have the best software in the world for people shipping for e-com and omnichannel. So take a look and let's see if we can help you.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So Aaron, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.